I don't scare easily, okay? I don't frighten easily, but this was making me feel really, really uneasy. It was so unnerving. So I made the decision, that's it, I'm going to finish for the night. Many years ago, in the days when I was setting out as a young journalist, one of the first publications I worked for was in a provincial town called Belper. Now, Belper's a very historic place. It's several miles north of my home city of Derby, and it was a place that I really enjoyed working. I got on well with the community, I had great colleagues, and it was just a nice place to be. As I say, a very historic town. So, Belper was famous for nail making back in medieval times, and it expanded rapidly during the Industrial Revolution. And one of the town's main focal points is the huge mill, which comes from that particular time, which is still standing next to the river. Now, just to set the scene and tell you a little bit about the layout of the town, Belper's a very hilly town, and the main street is actually on a hill. So you've got shops on either side, and then about halfway up there was a park on the right hand side, and you carry on right to the very end, and the marketplace, the main town square, is actually at the top of a hill, the top of the main high street. At the time I worked there, the marketplace was largely used as a car park, and on three sides you had a mixture of shops and pubs, and of course the parking in the middle. Now, on the opposite side of the road, there was an alleyway that leads into a dead end, basically. And it was at the end of this alleyway, in a building in which the Belper News office was located. So just to set the scene for you, you'd walk into the alleyway, and in front of you, you'd have the main entrance door for the building in which the Belper News was situated. And to the right of that, you'd have one shop. I can't remember what the name of the shop was or what it sold, but there was a shop. I think it might have been a wedding shop or something like that. Anyway, going back to the Belper News building, you go in the main door, and right in front of you were some steps. Now, these steps used to go down into a basement area. I say an area, really, it just led down to a door. Now, this door was always locked, and the reason it was always locked is because underneath Belper Marketplace, there's a maze of passageways. And these passageways can only be located from certain points around the area. One of these points was this particular door. So obviously it was kept locked to keep people out of the passageways. I did actually have an opportunity to go into a little bit of that network at some stage with the man who had the keys for the door. But, I literally just scratched the surface. From what I understand, there's a really big network. Now, another thing about this network, which leads us a little bit into what I'm about to tell you, the sort of eerie nature of the story I'm about to tell you. People had reported seeing lights coming from beneath the marketplace. Now, I'm not entirely sure how this happened. I don't know whether it was in shops or through the floorboards, or whether it was between the stones or whatever. I don't know how it was possible, but this was a rumour that was going around that people were basically able to see lights from time to time. So nobody could explain it. It was all very mysterious, and there were rumours that this passageway network was haunted. Anyway, going back to the layout of the building. So in the main entrance, down the steps to this door I've just been telling you about, and then the only other points that you could go to were upstairs. So you'd go up the stairs, and on the first floor was the Belper News office. So you'd walk into the Belper News office, right in front of you was the reception. Behind the reception, an open plan office, was the advertising department where all the reps used to sit. And there was a partition behind that, and then on the other side you had the editorial department, where myself as the chief reporter and Adrian, the editor, and anybody else who was writing copy for the paper would sit and work. And then just behind that you had the toilets and a little kitchen area. On the flex floor above was an identical office. Now, as far as I can remember, this office was always empty. I never remember another business being in this office during my particular time working for the newspaper. So effectively, the only functioning business in the particular part of the building where the Belper News was based was the Belper News itself. The shop was separate and it was downstairs next to the main entrance door. And with it being down an old passageway and the end of a dead end, it was often quite dark. So, I mean, yes, we did have windows, but, you know, there wasn't a lot of natural light beaming its way into the office. So one particular night, I was due to go on holiday. I got a week or 2 weeks off, I can't remember which, and I decided to stay late to finish some stories, some articles that I was writing for the next edition of the newspaper. Everybody had gone home, including Adrian, and I was there by myself, sat writing away. And all of a sudden, I heard the door bang. Now, it wasn't like a slam. It was literally like the sound of the door opening and closing, and the bang was the sound of the door shutting. Automatically, of course, I assumed it was Adrian who'd come into the office, and I shouted his name, but I didn't get any reply. So I thought, well, fair enough, you know, maybe he hasn't heard me, or maybe he's going to play a practical joke on me. See, one thing that Adrian and I had was we had a very good sense of humour, and we often used to play practical jokes on each other. So I was sort of half expecting him to leap round the corner of the partition and surprise me, or he'd be waiting on the other side and planning something for me. God knows what, but yeah, that was a thought that went through my mind. So I shouted his name again, didn't hear anything, so naturally I stood up, went round the other side of the partition, and expecting to greet Adrian, and there was nobody there. So, okay, a little bit strange, but I thought, well, maybe he's hiding on the opposite side of the reception as you walk in. So I walked down through the open plan advertising department, round the reception, and there was nobody there. Quick look outside the door, you know, couldn't hear anybody going up or down the stairs. Very, very strange, but I thought, well, there must be a logical explanation. Maybe somebody entered and then they left very quickly before I had time to see them or hear them. Anyway, I went back to work, and again, I'm typing away, and all of a sudden, and this was just a few minutes later, the same sound. The door opened and then bang closed. Again, I'm sort of thinking, is it Adrian? It's got to be some sort of joke. But then I also heard, this time, unlike the first time, I actually heard what appeared to be like change jangling. So imagine like you've got some change in your pocket and you're jangling the change in your pocket. It was that type of sound. So I was obviously clear in my mind that there was somebody in the office. So I shouted Adrian's name, and then very quickly, so that he didn't have a chance to get away, or so I thought it was him, I ran around the partition. But again, there was nobody there. So I dashed very quickly through the office and then round the other side of the reception to make sure that, you know, if somebody was trying to get away playing a joke, they didn't have time, nobody there. So, thinking very quickly, I dashed down the stairs to the main door and I locked the main entrance door. My train of thought was that if somebody was in the building and they were playing jokes or larking about, they wouldn't be able to get out without me unlocking the door. So I would be able to search the rest of the building and find them. So I got the door locked, and I obviously knew if anybody was moving around or tried to unlock the door, so if it was Adrian or another member of staff, if they'd got the keys to the door downstairs, they'd obviously be able to unlock it, but I would hear that. So I went down the steps to this basement door that led out to all of these passageways underneath the marketplace, and that door was locked. There was nobody down there, the door was locked, so absolutely nobody in that particular area. So then I went back up the stairs and went into the Belper News office. I kept the door propped open while I had a look around the office, and there was nobody in our office. Now, if somebody had have come down the stairs at that stage, I would have heard them and I would have seen them because the door was open and I was keeping one eye on the door whilst I was searching the office. So, I'm obviously convinced by this stage that there's somebody in the empty office upstairs. So I went up onto the second floor. Now, like I said, this office is identical to the Belper News office, except completely empty. So I opened the door, which is always unlocked. It certainly was unlocked whenever I tried to have a look around. And there was nobody there. You know, you could see very clearly there was absolutely nobody there. Now I'm starting to think this is really weird. I'm starting to get a little bit freaked out about it. I mean, knowing the history of Belper and, you know, all these things were going through my mind. I was thinking about, you know, the stories to do with the maze network underneath the marketplace, the fact we were in this old building tucked away down this dark, dingy alleyway, and you know, all sorts of things were going through my mind. But I knew I had to finish my work, so sort of, you know, metaphorically shrugging my shoulders, I thought, right, okay, I'm going to go back and crack on. So I went back down the stairs, sat at my desk and started working on my articles again. Then, surprise, surprise, literally a few minutes later, the door goes again. Okay, and then I also heard the change jangling. So this was the second time I'd heard the change jangling. So 3 times for the door, twice for the change. I jumped straight up and went round the corner to see if I could catch anybody. I didn't shout anybody's name. I just literally leapt up, went round the corner of the partition. There was clearly nobody there. I couldn't hear any movement outside. I did have a quick look outside the door, couldn't see anybody, didn't hear anybody moving around. Now I'm starting to feel really freaked out by this now. And I thought, okay, I'm going to finish my articles quickly, or as quickly as possible, and then I'll leave for the evening and, you know, go off and enjoy my holiday. So I went back to my desk, and all of a sudden, it's really difficult to describe this. I'm starting to get the shivers a little bit remembering it. But while I was sitting there, all of a sudden this really horrible, uneasy feeling started to come over me. And it was all I could describe it was like there was a presence of somebody standing behind me. So you've got the partition at the side, I'm sitting here writing my stories, the entrance to the part around the partition is behind me. And it felt as though somebody was standing at the entrance where the partition was, looking at my back. And this sensation grew very quickly to the point that I spun around and there was nobody there. But I was so convinced that somebody was watching me that I actually went up to the gap in the partition between the 2 departments, and there was nobody there. Now this feeling really freaked me out. It was sort of, I don't scare easily, okay, I don't frighten easily, but this was making me feel really, really uneasy. It was so unnerving, and this sensation continued, and if anything, it started to increase. So I made the decision, that's it, I'm going to finish for the night. I went in, I finished the article very quickly that I was writing. I had some more that I needed to do, but I thought I'm going to come back in the morning. I know I'm on holiday, I'm going to come back in the morning, I'm going to finish it. I was supposed to be meeting a friend of mine for a drink after work. I phoned them up and I said, look, I'm going to finish now. It's an hour earlier than we originally arranged to meet, but I've got a story to tell you when we get there. So, quickly finished off this article, shut the computer down, went out the building, unlocked the main entrance door, went out, quickly locked it, out into the marketplace, in my car and off. And I can tell you something, I was really, really relieved to sit down with my friend and have a pint. It was one of the best pints of beer I've ever had in my life, I can tell you that. It was so nice to sit down and relax and get away from this horrible feeling, this strange occurrence that had happened in the office. Now, I have experienced some strange things, which I'll tell you in other stories in the series. So, you know, I was no stranger to these sort of like supernatural, paranormal type of experiences, but this was really, it was a really, really unpleasant feeling. So the following morning, I went back into work. I obviously still had some articles to finish, even though I was technically on holiday. And I obviously told Adrian and the rest of my colleagues the story. And of course, I wanted to know if they'd had any similar experiences. So, you know, I asked around and nobody had had anything similar to the experience that I'd had. And Adrian, he sometimes used to stay on his own in the office working, and as I had done in the past. And neither of us, as far as I'm aware, Adrian never did. But I mean, certainly during my time there, I never experienced anything like it afterwards, and I hadn't experienced anything like it before. So it was a one-off from my own perspective. And my colleagues gave me indications at that particular time that they hadn't experienced anything like it either. Now, clearly, being a journalist, you have an inquisitive mind, and I obviously wanted to get to the bottom of it and find out, a little bit more about the building, and, whether or not there was a history of hauntings in the building or anything like that. And I didn't really get any great information that indicated that there was anything bad that had happened there, or or reports of any hauntings there in the past. It was an old building, but by all intents and purposes, even though it was tucked back from the road in quite a dark alleyway, all the ingredients were there for what you would think would be a haunted building. But people really, apart from my experience, hadn't really experienced anything similar. One particular day, a woman came into the office claiming to be a medium. Now, personally, I thought she was more of an extra large. I'm only joking. It's a terrible joke, I know. She asked me a few questions. I explained to her briefly what had happened, not the whole detail, obviously, because I wanted to gain information from her based on what she could feel, rather than, give her the whole story. And she started claiming that she could sense some sort of presence in the building. Now, I have to be honest with you, I can't really remember much of what she said, and I'll tell you why. Although I can remember vividly, like it was yesterday, the experience that happened to myself, this woman that came in started asking me a few questions, and then all of a sudden declared, out of nowhere, "You're a Capricorn," talking about my star sign. A bit of a random statement, but also blatantly incorrect, because I'm actually a Scorpio. So as soon as that happened, pretty much I discounted her. I thought, she's a fake, and I pretty much switched off. Always polite, always well mannered, but I wasn't really taking in what she was saying, because I didn't think there was any legitimacy to what she was saying. Now, there is a final twist to this story, albeit a rather sinister one. In the last few days, Adrian, my friend and former editor at the Belper News, and I have been in contact. And I mentioned to Adrian, obviously, that I was going to produce a story about my experience in our old office. It doesn't actually exist, the office, anymore, but we're talking 25, 26 years ago now, so it's quite a few years ago. Anyway, during our communication, Adrian informed me that a former colleague of ours, Barry, I'm not going to mention his surname because I don't know if he'd want me to mention it or not, but Barry, who was a druid, if I remember correctly, he was a very, very spiritual person, was working there one night by himself as well. And similar to my own experience, he could feel this rather horrible, sinister presence in the office. Now, I don't know whether it's because of his spirituality, or his, being druid, or etc., but he was adamant, apparently, that the presence was that of an angry man with a pitchfork. Now, I know that sounds really, really strange. I don't know whether he saw the apparition or not. I mean, I don't know how he would be able to ascertain that without seeing it, but he could have felt it and had a very, very clear idea in his mind as to what the presence was. We looked into it a little bit more, and Adrian informs me that the building was actually a former stables. So, man with a pitchfork, former stables, obviously somebody that probably looked after the horses and tended to the hay. Why he was angry, I don't know, but that's how the story goes. Anyway, to cut a long story short, Barry, apparently, like myself, was very shook up by the incident, and after that particular night he refused to work in the office alone again at night. So, was the presence, the sinister presence that I felt, the angry man with the pitchfork? I don't know. Obviously I never saw anything, I could only feel this horrible sensation, this very unnerving feeling. As always, I'm open to suggestions, so please drop a comment in the comment section below. It'd be great to hear from you. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the story. Thanks very much for listening, and I look forward very much to seeing you next time. Until then, take care. All the best.